it's the whole plan is very difficult for us to advance because there's some key components in it that are seen by the residents and the board as a complete disconnect between the feedback of the community and what the result was of Harriman's plan and what the staff recommendations are. And it would be difficult, if not impossible, for us to ask the residents to support the plan because it still does have the potential, whether you think it's feasible to happen or not. The potential, the way the zoning regs are written and the way that the plan is designed, still has the potential to add 1,200 to 1,500 additional apartments. And whether that could ever happen or happen over an extended period of time, as we've said since November, residents, rightfully so, are looking at the plan that that's what the potential is. And if the plan isn't rewritten so that we safeguard against it, or we have some restrictions in terms of both the height and density that protects against it, it's a hard sell, and it's a hard thing to ask people to accept in lieu of what the potential benefits are. So I'll preface it that way. And within the plan itself, it's been difficult for the ones that people have seen, either in public or through our publications, to understand why there's been limited depictions of parcels of what could happen. For example, Winfield Street is highly depicted in terms of what Harriman thinks could be developed there. But the parcels that people have said they're most concerned with for months, like the Wells Fargo parcel and the St. Thomas parcel and the East Avenue empty lot at exit 16 parcel, are not being identified to us. And that raises a big concern because we know that the Wells Fargo parcel is at a point where it's literally ready to advance those plans as soon as this plan goes through.
I think it doesn't happen quickly, it just never does. Sure, there's probably going to be a few applications that come in fairly quickly. I don't think we've made it any secret that the folks that have the Wells Fargo parcel would like to develop that piece of property. I mean, drive by it, look at an aerial picture of it. It's a big, huge, empty parking lot. I think that anybody who had that would want it to redevelop into something else. But what's proposed, and I'll let all the committee members speak for themselves, I think is very measured. It's not overly dense. It's one additional story of height that's allowed. Many houses in the city can be built to similar heights based on the way the grade and topography works. So it's not a big reach. It's not a big ask. In my opinion, it's appropriate for the geography and the area we're talking about. The areas proposed for the higher density are a confined area. We try to keep it towards the main corridor and not spread out into the neighborhoods, which are well established and well thought of. So I think overall, I would describe it as measured and calculated.
But there are things that are in the plan that we're not clear why they're in the plan. For example, the promenade at Seaview Avenue and the potential to remove the DPW facility and yard waste. And then I can say, as we go through this, I don't know if we want to spend time on every single item, but even in your comments back to me, your answers back to me, the traffic analysis leaves a lot to be desired. And your answers back to us were that you have to go back to that consultant, NV5, and ask them for clarification. The reason why that's important is in second most important concern to residents here, outside of the number of potential apartments and the potential for where people are going to park, is the fact that people do still have cars. And so if we miss the mark on traffic analysis for what it is and what it's going to be, and every traffic study is going to come back in saying no significant impact, or that it possibly improves the grade level, then we just don't find that acceptable. Probably could have commented on almost every sentence in this plan, because some of this, as we were reading it and talking, this is the board members, because we couldn't share it outside with the stakeholders. Almost every sentence in there, we had some question on either where did it come from or how could it possibly be interpreted that way. So let me address this first one, because this one is important. In the plan, in the first sentence says, East Norwalk offers an enticing quality of life, particularly for families and commuters. This is the opinion of the community the feedback from the board, who represents the community at large, and our collective experience of either being on the board, living here, interacting with communities, or interaction with government, a whole host of things over the past 17 to 20 years. Yes, there's a quality of life, and the concern here is that we have been facing an eroding quality of life in East Norwalk. And so we don't want to have a plan that adds to that with development congestion. The number one concern with apartments. We're not addressing the lack of enforcement, the congestion woes that are tied into traffic signalization, infrastructure neglect overall, etc. So our point was that we want to make sure that we're not eroding something that we already see is eroding, and we don't want to erode it further with a plan that doesn't support either maintaining it or certainly enhancing it.
I mean, this might be an oversimplified question and how to ask it, but my opinion is the plan doesn't, that's not obviously not the goal of the plan. I don't think that the recommendations within the plan will lead to that. If anybody else feels differently, then it'd be good to know.
We went through a very public process. I think we had to make some decisions about height and density, and I think that balance was struck. I mean, we basically are only allowing one story above what's allowed currently and making some other little zoning changes here and there. And for me, the real meat of the situation is what is outlined in the zoning guidelines and the design guidelines. So as you know, like what I really care about are what those amenities are and what will be offered if someone does add that extra story.
Mr. Kites, if you want to give you the floor, if you wanted to make any comments.
Thank you all, and I look forward to this continuing working on this and ironing it out. And I got to say too, I've been talking to a lot of East Norwalk residents, outside the NNA and folks there and others, and I think I feel like a lot of the folks have really a good understanding of what's going on. We've done a great job, Steve, in your office and everybody, of getting the information out there and having it available and being in the loop. I mean, that's not always the case, and I can say now, I feel like nothing's being done behind closed doors. Everything's out in the open, and thanks again to Steve, you and your staff for making that happen.
Sure.
Thank you.
The number one chant from the residents here, and we're talking about hundreds of them, so I'm not quite sure who John Kites, our district rep, interacts with, was no more apartments. We knew that we had to manage expectations when we went into this, that if we were going to look at a TOD study, which, by the way, people thought was a study and wouldn't be turned into a plan necessarily, it would just be, what are the possibilities? If we're looking at something now where we have the potential for growth, if you say, it's one thing, Stephanie, to say, well, we're just looking at one story over the current story. But now you're talking about 3.5 stories, correct? If you look at 3.5 stories.
And 2.5 is allowed now.
Right. So if we go from 2.5 to 3.5, then we can do that on every available parcel that fits into the zoning village district that it allows. We could be lined from I-95 all the way down to Mill Pond at Wells Fargo and some of the peripheral streets and into the industrial zone.